Tenbound, the world's leading research and advisory firm 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, is now announcing the Tenbound Sales Development Conference 2020. This year, we'll welcome over 750 of the top minds in sales development to two major conferences, the New York City Leadership Conference on June 18th and the San Francisco Multitrack Conference on August 17th. Join us at both and learn from the best in sales development in these one-day experiences. Gain the latest intelligence from the Tenbound analyst team, unparalleled training opportunities, and networking with the leaders in our industry at the Tenbound Sales Development Conference 2020. Go to tenbound.com/conference to learn more. That's tenbound.com/conference.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I'm your host, David Delaney, and honored to be joined today by the Chief Revenue Officer of User IQ, Mr. Dan Bonnet. Dan, how you doing today, sir?
Pretty good, David. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. We always are honored when leaders of the revenue organization come on because, you know, being in sales development, you're definitely in the trenches a lot of the time. So, Dan, thank you for coming on. You've got a really interesting background. You've been in the technology space for a while now, from success to success, it seems. How did you get into this? And, you know, tell us about your journey to becoming CRO over at User IQ.
Yeah, sure. It actually was a little bit of an unusual path to get here. But, you know, when I think about, you know, how people start, you know, in college and they think they want to do something and then wind up meandering into a completely different career path, you know, I followed a similar suit. By education, I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. You know, really enjoyed that. And I think it was a good place to get a degree, kind of followed in my father's footsteps going down that path. And then when I graduated, I got into business consulting. This was back in the late 90s when that was kind of at its heyday. Still trying to find my way. Never thought I was going to go into sales. I'm actually a little bit of an introvert. Went back to school at night, got an MBA in marketing and finance. And then by the time that part of my educational journey was over, I made the decision to restart my career because I really wanted to get into marketing at that point. And the only thing I could find was an entry-level position in sales. So I started taking a role as an SDR for a small cybersecurity company here in Atlanta, thinking it was going to be a short-term thing and I would eventually find my way into something more marketing-oriented. And never looked back. I found my stride talking to people, educating them about, you know, a solution that we were trying to sell. And fast forward 20 years, having had roles as an SDR, various roles as an AE, individual contributor, went into, you know, player coach roles, leadership roles, regional sales manager, helped develop an international sales organization for SecureWorks, and ultimately moving into sales leadership, which I've been doing for the past 4 years or so.
Wow. Okay. They used to call that the accidental salesperson, you know?
Yeah. I mean, who knew? I really had no idea that this was going to be my path, but you know, for some reason, this is what clicked in my brain and I was able to do it, you know, pretty successfully. So I'm happy to have found my way into it. And, you know, the more and more I get to help other people become successful at a similar function, it's the more rewarding it becomes.
It's a great career, and it's like now that you're in it for life. It seems so. Yeah, and
exactly.
You know, it's interesting, Dan, because just as a side note, you mentioned you feel like you're more of on the introverted side, and the classic like stereotype of a salesperson is very extroverted, like, hey, used car salesman, like talk to anybody type of personality. But how did you balance, you know, more of that introversion and real thoughtfulness and that type of energy with being in sales and then still be successful?
Yeah, it was really hard for me when I first got started. I mean, not a public speaker, or at least back at that time I was, like, never done cold calling, never like sold stuff over the phone or over the web, like really totally new to everything about sales, right? Didn't even understand, like I got into cybersecurity after having studied mechanical engineering, completely unrelated, right? So I had to learn pretty much everything from scratch. But one of the things that I found I was really good at is taking difficult or complex concepts and kind of boiling them down to a way where you could explain it in very simple terms to help people understand them. And back then, cybersecurity was a relatively new thing that was just burgeoning at that time. So people didn't understand it. And we had to really help them understand how it affected their business and why they needed to take a look at those type of technologies to protect themselves. Now these days it's kind of obvious because, people are getting hacked all over the world. But back then it was really a relatively new concept. So I had to get really good at basically teaching people new ideas. And that's one of the things that I was really good at. I'm a very patient person. I can distill concepts, from very technical down to very simple terms. And I have a good way of interacting with people. I can help them understand things. So as a salesperson in general, I think that's a pretty important skill set.
That is really interesting. And did you find that you had to, manage your energy in a different way? Because, as an introverted person, you might get tired of having to interact with people. Like you need a little bit of time alone to recharge and then go back out. And did you have to kind of learn a new way of managing your energy in order to be successful?
Yeah, I think I just had to let my excitement about what I was selling kind of come through in the conversation. I'm a pretty even keel, level-headed guy, and I needed to, let that energy and passion flow through. And I think if you're going to be in sales, one of the things that I think people really need to consider, not just if they go into sales, but which company they choose to sell for, is they should really focus on picking something that they are passionate about. Because, bottom line is if you don't like what you're selling, as much as you want to keep a job, you're just not going to be good at it.
It's so true.
It's really like selecting the company and the product that you want to sell is one of the most important things you can do when you're getting into sales.
That's so interesting because, people that are more thoughtful and really need that time to be able to craft a solution and to be able to take a complex concept and make it simple, a teacher or someone who's patient, they are some of the most successful salespeople on earth, some of the most successful entrepreneurs. And it's just interesting because our society almost says like, if you're more on the introverted side, like there's something wrong with that. Like you shouldn't be in sales or things like that. But what I've seen in practice is that, especially now, because sales is so complex and there's so many different steps and things like that type of personality can thrive. And it's just really interesting to hear from someone like you. Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately it comes down to effective communication, right? If you're able to listen really well, think about what the customer is saying, empathize with them, and then, make a determination as to whether or not your solution or whatever it is that you're selling suits their needs and can be helpful to them, and then translate that into words that they can understand and attach to, then there's opportunity to be successful. But again, that's not necessarily a natural thing for everybody. So it takes time and effort and work to be able to craft those skills. Not everybody's a natural educator or teacher. Like you have to learn how to do those things. Some people it's natural, a lot of people it's not.
100%. And I think that's another thing that you nailed it is who are you as a person? What are your real strengths? And a lot of people are still kind of trying to find that, especially younger people. They're just like, what am I good at? Like, what are my real strengths? And you got to try a lot of different things and experiment. And then you happen to find that you were really good at these very valuable skills that happen to accelerate your career in the sales field. So that's really interesting.
I also happen to be really, really competitive against myself. When I grew up, I was always playing individual sports, not team sports. And so the only person I could get mad at when I wasn't successful was me. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself as an individual contributor to perform. And, that made me work extra hard. It made me respond to customers in the evening, respond to customers on the weekends, basically everything that it took to build those relationships and make sure that I didn't let anything slip in the deals that I was working. Not everybody's wired to do that, but for me, that's what it took for me to be successful. And, I put the time and effort in to do that.
That is so interesting. That's a strong sense of personal responsibility that you had coming up. And I had some questions for you. I want to flip this around a little bit from an SDR, BDR perspective as someone who's listening. How do you assess your own performance as an SDR or BDR and really, on a daily, weekly basis so that you can kind of manage yourself, as you were able to do it innately, but for someone who's trying to figure out, how do I stay on top of myself? Any tips there?
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of interesting. One of the things that really interested me about this podcast series is, this was this was like 2002 when I first started as an SDR for the first time. And I mean, I did the job. I know what the role is like. It's a grind. I get it is one of the hardest jobs you could have. And I started thinking about how it has evolved over the years and, what it was like doing it back then, manual effort. I didn't want to sound like your grandpa where it's like you're walking uphill in the snow both ways to school. But you think about what they have now, what the technologies to make SDRs efficient and successful and process driven and all the metrics of data that you can track to understand what's working and what's not working. I mean, you walk into to a tech company these days and you're starting as an SDR, you have this amazing tech stack that is just pre-built and ready to help you be successful. And that's just amazing. So I found it really interesting to understand like what you can provide to those folks to give them a leg up compared to, what we've had years ago. But when I think about your question about how do I assess my own performance, because I get asked this a lot, I think it goes back to understanding first and foremost what your managers and the leadership team expect out of this role, right? This relates to both your expertise, right? So learning and mastering the material that you're going to be engaging with customers on and learning that, mastering it as fast as possible so that you can actually start producing something and be effective when you're talking to customers. And you should seek to be as fluent at this as quickly as possible, right? And that doesn't mean just go through the training that the company offers or the reading material that they give you as references, but find opportunities to test your messaging, to test your pitch, to test your agility in conversations with colleagues and get as much feedback as you can until you're on solid footing and can hold your own. And again, when I think about assessing your own performance, take control of that as best you can, do as much of it as possible, and try to master that faster than anybody else on the team, because the fact you can't be productive until you've gotten that part down.
100%.
Next, look at, obviously your sales performance against quota. That's an obvious one. I wouldn't necessarily use quota as the ultimate benchmark, because really if you want to assess yourself and think about how quickly you can progress your career, which is something that's of very much interest to SDRs these days, benchmark yourself against your peers, right? And so the top performers on the team. Meeting, just minimum quota standards is a great way to stay in the role you're in longer than you want to. And so, think about who's doing well, who are the top performers, what are they doing, what numbers are they putting up, and find a way to match them or beat them. And that's just from a quota perspective. And then lastly, stay on top of your own KPIs. Every company is going to have, different KPIs of things they expect the SDR teams to adhere to, but don't rely on your manager to tell you if you're making enough calls, or if you're sending enough emails, having enough meaningful conversations, requiring to leads to, fast enough, those type of things. Get your own dashboard set up, look at it daily, know exactly where you stand. If you take vacation or if you take a long lunch, or for some reason, if your KPIs fall short for a period of time, take matters into your own hands, correct your deficiencies, and make sure at the end of the week you've put up the numbers that you're supposed to put up.
I love it. I mean, this is good advice for me. I'm taking a bunch of notes here.
It's not.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to say that's easy to do. I mean, again, the work of an SDR is hard, and it's a constant grind. There's a lot of activity that's expected, but taking 30 minutes a day and looking at what were you able to accomplish, having goals at the beginning of the day, seeing if you've achieved those goals at the end of the day, and kind of keeping yourself aligned to what you're supposed to accomplish is the best way to make sure you accomplish those things.
Yes, I love it. And one thing you mentioned is self-management. And it's like, if you're managing yourself according to the various things you mentioned, Dan, then you're taking one burden off of your manager and making your manager's life a little less stressful, because it's like, I know that SDR is doing great. They're managing themselves basically. So I can put my energy in on the people that need me to, like, not babysit, but it's like, the people that are not self-managing. Yeah.
Well, even better, right? Think about it from this perspective. The first couple times you're going to have one-on-ones with your manager, you're going to look at your dashboards. They're going to look at what you're producing, your KPIs, and you're going to inspect that stuff to make sure you're getting the numbers game part of the job done, right? If you can show every time you meet with your manager that, man, I got this stuff on lockdown, like you do not have to worry about me doing the KPI part of my business. I'm on it. I know what to do. I'm following the process. Like that is not something you have to worry about me for. Then you can talk about other challenges that they can give to you to help you develop your career. You can talk about career development things as to where you want to go next. I mean, you can't do that. You can't have those conversations until you've mastered your job, right? And shown that that's something that you got under control.
Totally. I mean, and it's like, it's kind of harsh to say, but hey, you're in the job. Nobody owes you anything. You got to earn it every day. And I almost sound like Rocky or something, but it's like, you know, bringing that to the manager is like, you've got the table stakes. The table stakes are paid. You've got that on lockdown. So now you're ready for the next step. It's not like you can't just walk in and be like, hey, I've been here for 3 months. I'm ready to be promoted. You know, you got to earn it there. There's
got to be something of substance to it, which is interesting. A question that I get quite often is from SDRs in particular is, how do I make myself stand out to leadership?
Yes.
Right. Because, it's one thing when, there's a 20-person company, everybody knows each other and everybody sees what you're doing. But as a company grows and the sales organization starts growing, then you're like, okay, well, the head of sales, is running an organization of 50 people and he's thinking about strategy and he's not looking at specifically what everybody's doing every day. You've got managers that do that. So the visibility of, if I'm, a possible person that could get promoted, to him goes away. And so I get that question a lot. It's, how do I make myself stand out once the organization starts getting bigger and more career opportunities start opening up? And so I'm happy to talk about that a little bit if you think it's a worthwhile topic.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love it. What do we have to do to stand out, especially if we're at one of those bigger companies?
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about this. I've lived through it also. So I've got some personal experience, because when I first took my job as an SDR, and I didn't know what it encompassed, and I started doing it, I'm like, man, I want to do this as short as possible and get into an AE role. So I went to my VP of sales and I said, hey, this is all well and good, but how do I get to the next job? And, he basically said, do X, Y, and Z, beat your number by a wide margin, find deals that close, and, show me that you understand the material, right? And that you can talk, to customers in a way that I wanted to talk to them. So I'm like, okay. So I started doing those things. So I think first and foremost, if you want to stand out, it's important to meet the leaders on your team. I think as a company gets bigger, if you're an introvert or you're not totally extroverted, you might be reluctant to approach leaders and even let them know who you are and make sure that they have a chance to get to know you a little bit. And yeah, hierarchies exist. And just because one of the execs hasn't gone out of the way to meet you doesn't mean they don't want to know you. It just means that they're busy and they've got other stuff going on, and they're pulled in a bunch of different directions. So you should be proactive and go out of your way to make sure that you get a chance to meet them, spend a little bit of time with them, and then find a way to stay on their radar. So that's one of the first things that I would recommend, especially in larger organizations where it's harder to do that. The next thing that comes to mind is, be vocal, but in a productive way, and bring new ideas to the table. One of the things that I really liked about a lot of the people that I've hired is, there's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of these podcasts, and, there's a lot of resources that, young sellers are hearing about and learning from, and they're bringing new ideas to the table of what things we could experiment with and try in our sales organization. And I'm the first one to tell you, I don't know everything. So I want to get these ideas from smart people as a way to make the business better. So being outspoken and bringing those ideas to the table in a positive way, well thought through, and thinking about how it can improve the culture or the results that we're getting is one really good way to help you stand out. I would warn against being outspoken with a constant sense of negativity to the things you say, even if you want to try to get things changed because something's not working. Growing companies will always have things that aren't working. And so, any member of the team has to live through that and survive through that, while you forge your way forward. So when there's issues or challenges or problems that the company's trying to deal with, find not just the issues, but also find solutions and present them in a way that, shows a good path forward with well thought through ideas that are not going to be too disruptive to the organization. And look, just don't get discouraged if they don't get, jumped all over at the, as soon as you present them, because, there's other priorities. But I think being smart about what you bring to the table is a good way to get noticed.
Amen. Oh, man, this is great stuff. I mean, because it's all, it's not just the great idea that you have or bringing a problem. You have to bring the solution also and maintain a positive attitude, because like you said, a lot of times people are going 100 miles an hour, and it's a gripe that you hear a lot just in any organization, not just in sales, that, oh, I have all these great ideas, but nobody's listening to me. And it's like, well, wait a minute, let's take a step back. Or this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this is broken, and this is broken. It's like, yeah, I mean, we're kind of, we're building the car while we're driving down the street. Like, yeah, some stuff's not going to get broken, but we're still ratcheting the business forward, and you need positive, productive members of the team to help you keep building that car so you can drive it faster. But, there isn't a company in the world that doesn't have problems. You need to focus on the positive things so that problem solvers. It's not like Pollyanna, positive attitude, Tony Robbins. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like, it's a lot better than being a negative Nelly, bringing everybody down. But you've got, did you have another way to stand out? I cut you off.
Yeah.
I love this.
I've got a couple more tips I would say is, make sure you're always looking out for your customers. You're looking out for the company you work for. You're looking out for your team members, right? Even above yourself at times. A team member who is helpful to their peers, who's selfless in that fact, and is, looking to help the team be successful, selfless with their time, willing to be a mentor or, supportive peer. Those type of things will just always open doors to having a bright future. I mean, there's some people that, they come to work, they want to focus on their job and execute really well and crush their numbers, and that is totally fine and respected as well. But I think those that help rise the tide that lifts all boats, those are people actually get, noticed, often as well. One other thing that I think is important is not to be afraid to highlight your successes, right? And make them known to the leaders that are going to be looking for the next AEs on their team, if that's the path you want to go down, right? Don't be afraid to bring your successes to the forefront, tell your stories and make them sound compelling, highlight how you are bringing value to the business, quantify it if you can, and present it in a professional way. One of the things that I did when I was an SDR, we had 10 AEs at the time, and it was 2 SDRs, and it was a really, immature program. Like, we were just pounding out 60 calls a day and, creating, I think, 3 leads a month was the goal back then. And, as we started getting some traction, I wanted to bring some visibility to the work that we were doing. And so I started, for every lead that converted to a closed deal, I printed out a certificate and I hung it on the wall outside the VP of sales office. And I said, these are the deals with the company logo and the value of the deal that came from the SDR team. And, after a couple months, that wall was covered in these certificates. And it's like, you had to take notice, right? It wasn't about me, but it was about, this is what this group is doing for the company. And I think that, you fast forward a year later, that team was, 10 people strong, and they continued to invest in it because it was bringing results, right?
And it's tangible. You see it right there. Look at all the certificates.
No, exactly.
I love that idea.
And they weren't inbound leads. So these are things we were generating it from cold calling.
Yes.
So there was a clear attribution of, if these people were not on the phone, we would not be getting this business.
Well, it's interesting because, you're always taught as a kid, don't toot your own horn, like keep a low profile, like don't stick out, and then you realize when you get into the business world, there's a continuum, like where there's really obnoxious people who are always beating their chest and like talking about how great they are. And that's just annoying. But a majority of people are way over on the other side of the continuum where they're just like silently grinding it out, working away. And they're not, if you do it in a fun, positive way, like what you're talking about, then it's a win for everybody. But I think most people are just like, I'm just going to let my results speak for themselves, and I'm not going to toot my own horn, and it's kind of detrimental.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I've seen happen over and over again, and, I would advise, SDRs that want to grow into AE roles to, to try and take matters into their own hands. Again, you have to do it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, right? So toot your own horn, but in the right way. And most managers, I mean, if I was a manager and an SDR came up to me, it's like, hey, I want to showcase what I'm working on for you. What's the right way to do it? And then let the manager tell you what the right way to do that is. And that way you're not doing things your way that winds up, coming across the wrong way to them. Ask them, what's the right way to do this? The interesting thing is, as companies start growing and scaling, and they start saying, okay, like we need to add more mature, seasoned salespeople to our team, it becomes harder and harder for an SDR who's never been an AE to take some of those roles, right? Because you got to start hiring from the outside. You need somebody with 5 years of sales experience instead of somebody that's just coming right out of the SDR program. So while usually good companies will open some spots up for SDR, not every spot will be open for an SDR. And so you, again, as sales leaders start looking externally to hire people, it's even more important that they know the quality of the talent they have on the SDR team so that they can say, oh, why would I hire somebody from the outside, even though they got a few more years of sales experience, when I got somebody that's really articulate, knows the messaging, knows the product, knows our market really well, and I can kind of teach them some of the skills that they don't have. But again,
it's a no-brainer,
they need to be,
but they have to know.
It's a no-brainer, but they need to know you. They need to know you. They need to have seen you, and they need to trust you in order to make that decision. So you need to be in their face to some degree and make sure they remember you when they're looking for those candidates.
Yes. I love it. This is so useful. This is so helpful. And, we were talking about, from an SDR perspective, they're walking past the conference room, and they see people like yourself, the CRO, the VP of sales, the head of marketing. They see them in these conference rooms and they keep walking by every day. And I always wanted to peek in there and be in the room, and hear what they're doing in there, what they're talking about. So, and I know it's a big question, but at a high level, what are you guys talking about in there?
That's boring stuff. You wouldn't be interested in that if you were in there.
Tell
it's just
me.
monotonous, Nah, you wouldn't be interested. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, there's a lot of topics that come up in those meetings, but, around the sales area, it's really, what does it take to be successful and how can we kind of keep capitalizing on the successes we've seen? What opportunities are there to do more of the good things we're doing? What areas should we, are we not being successful in that we think we can tweak to be more successful, or should we start moving away from certain areas so that we're not wasting time on things that are not producing results? So a lot of it is looking at data, right? Understanding what is going well, trying to find those pockets of opportunities where you think you can go after something in a repeatable way, pour fuel on the fire, invest more capital, and get more out of that opportunity before it goes away. That's generally one of the things that we do talk about quite a bit. We're inspecting the sales funnel. We're trying to look for bottlenecks of poor conversions where we can start applying training tools or resources to make improvements and see improved conversion rates. Good teams, like good organizations, have sales and marketing looking at these things together, because there's things you can do in alignment with each other to produce better results as you move, not just from the top of the marketing funnel, but all the way down through the sales funnel as well. We're looking at, past results, analyzing potential growth areas based on customer stories, recent wins, new use cases that we're discovering from conversations we're hearing with customers, trying to assess how to capture more of the market so that we can put a plan together for that. We discuss competition. And then, lastly and importantly, we spend a lot of time looking at compensation and making sure that our sales team are being taken care of, that they're earning the things that we promised them they could earn when they joined the company and we made those promises to them. We want to be empathetic to the work that they're doing and making sure that they feel like they can earn a good living working and selling the product that they're doing at this company. So there's a lot of time thinking through that and optimizing the compensation plan to be competitive in the market and make sure that we're helping them earn a solid wage.
Man, my head is spinning. You're managing a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
I was also thinking, whoever owns User IQ or the, the shareholders are lucky to have somebody like you working there that can handle all this stuff for them. And I mean, on the people reporting to you, that you're thoughtful about this and not, just in there doing pipeline reviews all day. That's the stereotype.
We do talk about pipeline. We talk about big deals as well, and how we can throw the right resources at some larger opportunities to give ourselves the best chance of winning. But there's a lot more to it than that. You invest a lot in a sales organization, right? Just from hiring to training to all the marketing spend that you do to fill the funnel. Like, there's an incredible amount of investment that goes into it. And so thinking through, all the things that are working is really important to keep the team intact, to keep them motivated and engaged, and to ultimately results hitting numbers.
And what is like a cadence for you as far as the way that you work on a weekly basis? Are you pretty much, in reaction mode to all these stakeholders that need you to do things for them? Or do you have any control over your calendar? I'm making a big assumption there. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a fantastic question. I'll tell you, it depends on. Sometimes it depends on the sales leader and how they operate. It also depends on the stage of the company and the maturity of your sales organization, the maturity of your product market fit, and things like that. So if you're in a smaller organization that's not scaling yet, where you've got to grow really quickly and add a bunch of people, and you're constantly hiring and interviewing and things like that, then what I'm trying to do is optimize how we sell what we have, right? So it's a lot of listening to customer calls, sitting in on demos, getting seller feedback, helping with the tactics of winning, deal by deal. So a lot of deal by deal strategy and things like that, to understand our customer, how they align with our product, how we can optimize our sales process and the resources we use during our sales process to, win as much as we can, and then start laying that as a foundation for how we're going to sell what we sell. And so in that scenario, a lot of my time is dedicated to just working one-on-one with reps and with SDRs to do the tactics of the deals. At the same time, I'm building out, a training program as the things that I realize, okay, everybody needs to know this, everybody needs to know this. I'm putting the building blocks together of a training program so that if and when we do have to scale, I've got a lot of that foundation stuff already created for the new people that I'm going to have to hire.
Perfect. Scale.
Yeah. When you're scaling and starting to grow fast, and you're doing a lot of interviewing all the time, you're building an interview and a hiring framework. The training program is really important at that point in time. You have to have a mentoring program so that when you do hire people, they feel very, very well supported. And you're also spending a lot of time with other managers in the organization, because you really got to align well with the marketing leadership, with the CS leadership, with the product leadership, to make sure that as you're growing fast, you're getting the right stuff to take to market, the right messaging, and the CS support that you're going to provide to your customers is up to standards, right? And I think as you get to a really large, mature organization and you've got managers layered upon managers, and, as a leader, you're not doing everything yourself, then you're doing more strategic thinking, planning, long-term planning, that kind of stuff, while the managers are doing more of the day-to-day tactics and deals and trainings and, making sure that the wheels are continuing to turn.
Got it. Okay. So you're not overly stressed at this point. I guess it just depends what day it is, right?
Yeah, I am pulled in a lot of different directions. I would say I don't have a lot of free time for myself because I'm in a lot of meetings, but you do what you got to do to grow the business.
Well, let me ask you, as you're looking at, you mentioned conversion rates is one of the things that you look at, as you're planning. And, at some point, some sales leaders look at those and they look at the economics of running a sales development program, and they decide to outsource the function, or they just hire another firm. Maybe they don't even have a sales development function at their company, so they just hire another firm. And, has that ever come up in your experience? What are your thoughts on having an outsourced provider of SDR services?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's been around for a while, that concept. I think maybe it's more popular these days. I've personally never done it. Like, we've used some firms in the past to kind of supplement the leads that we've gotten and kind of try to add more to the top of the funnel. but I've never personally taken my team and said, hey, listen, like we're firing everybody and we're outsourcing this role. But I mean, I can be objective, right? And, let's look at it objectively from both sides as to why a company would do this. I guess let's start with looking at the standpoint of let's not outsource this, right? We're going to build it. We're going to keep it in-house, right? Some of the benefits of that is the team will be intimately familiar with your company, your culture, your brand, your processes, your messaging, the product, and that will make them better, faster at hyping up your company, talking about the brand, taking the product to market. Like they will just be better SDRs because they're immersed in your business, right? You'll have much better control over their processes and how they operate, data you can get, what's working, what's not working, make swift course corrections on things that you see in the numbers is much better if you have all that function in-house. You'll have more control with how they engage with customers, which for many organizations is really, really important, that customer experience side of things. If you're one of those organizations that's really well aligned between sales and marketing, then the SDR team is a great source of field level intelligence to serve as inputs to both sales and marketing leadership. And, and lastly, you're investing in a great training program for future AEs and future managers that will stay in your company if they get promoted. And you don't have that opportunity if you've outsourced this to somebody else. So there are so many success stories of SDRs that have gone on to accomplish much greater things in their careers. I'm an example of one of those. So, those are some pretty compelling reasons to keep it in-house, right?
Yes, definitely. And what about the other side though? I mean, why is there this huge proliferation of SDR outsource companies popping up?
Yeah, well, it's pretty hard to do it really well in-house, and it's an incredible investment to do it well. So it's not just an investment in money, but also in time and energy. And so some of those things aren't necessarily obvious to everybody, right? So it takes a lot of time and energy and commitment to ramp up a new employee in any department, right? Managers and peers make sacrifices to help those two new team members, ramp up and show them the rope, teach them what they need to know, set them on a path to be successful. For SDRs, even in particular, sometimes it's their first role in sales, first role in any company in general, right? And so they don't even know if they want to be in sales, but somebody told them this might be a good thing to do, so they take a crack at it. They don't know if they're going to be successful, and you're investing a lot of time and energy and money in those people. They may decide they don't even want to be in sales, right? And so it's a pretty high risk investment if you look at it from that perspective. Then, once they're trained and performing and they're hitting their goals and they're doing a good job, there's a lot of pressure for them to be promoted, right? And unfortunately, most SDRs don't want to stay SDRs for long, right? They have career aspirations, and there's an expectation that, 12 to 18 months from when they start, if they do their job, they'll be AEs or in a different career progression. And so after that time, if they haven't been promoted, they lose patience and they may depart to a different company. So the ROI that you see on all of the investment in a new employee isn't very good if somebody only stays for 12 to 18 months, right? And so it's really hard to continue to recruit and hire good people and onboard and train them. And you will just never have enough new AE roles to put every SDR that joins your company into. It doesn't happen. And so it can be really disruptive and high cost and emotionally draining to continue to go through that cycle. So that's a pretty big challenge.
Yes.
And so for some of those reasons, a company that specializes in this function, they have an always on hiring program. If people quit, they can shift people around to make sure you're still getting that same coverage you were getting before. They can smooth out the bumpiness of employees getting promoted or employees leaving. And they can continue to deliver that lead flow of, X number of leads a month, regardless of the things that happen to change. And that's what they specialize and are good at. That can be a pretty compelling offering, especially if they can do it at a lower cost than you doing it yourself and a less disruptive, set of activities than you doing yourself. That can be compelling, but there are trade-offs such as the quality of the leads, the depth of information that an SDR that doesn't know your company, what they can gather, and certainly the the ability to promote good people into other roles. You don't get that opportunity as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, it might take some trial and error to find a firm that is comfortable calling to your industry and knows the back and forth. And there might even be a specialized outsource SDR firm that only calls on, muffler repair shops, and they're
right,
really,
that's right.
They're really into your industry. And then, are they reliable? Are they good partners? Can they produce results? Because then you have a trusted partner. It's almost like a marketing agency. Like once you find a good marketing agency for your business, then you stick with them for years, because they can deliver.
They get it at that point.
They get it. Yeah. And then you could even, if you're doing pretty well at the company, like revenue wise, you could have an in-house team that has all the benefits of that you mentioned as far as the tribal knowledge and the great, people that you bring into the company that go through the SDR program. And then you have the outsource team as well, and they kind of play off of each other and support each other.
That's right. And if I think about, in what scenarios would I consider doing this kind of thing, if you think about buyers these days, right, they're doing a lot of research on your company, your industry, solutions like you have before they come inbound to you. And so by the time somebody says, okay, I want to talk to this company, and they're inbounding and they reach a, BDR or something like that, they're pretty educated, right? And so you wouldn't want to outsource that part of it, because somebody that doesn't know your product really well probably won't be able to answer the depth of questions that somebody who's done research may have, right? But if you're thinking about the outbounding function, where you're just calling people for the first time, you're trying to build awareness of your solution, you're trying to broaden your reach in the market and get people interested in the topic, and then, set appointments with somebody that might have a deeper knowledge of how you can work with a company like those new companies being contacted, that might be an area where it's a good fit. And, they're trying to get a little bit of interest, maybe get some, hit some qualifying characteristics, and then, set an appointment for somebody that can take them a level deeper.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you mentioned about if the prospect has been doing research, they've been reading all these reports and analyst reports and everything, and then they finally come inbound, the immediate response is, we'll just send them to a sales rep. But the thing is, the sales rep might be on another demo, or they might be on an airplane, or they're at an event, or, they're closing a deal. And there's not like one designated person who can take that inbound lead and qualify it if you don't have any SDRs at your company, so it's interesting.
That's right. And I think when you think about, again, how can an SDR stand out, right? While there's pressure to kind of move quickly and, tee up meetings and hit your numbers, the advice I would give them is always try to go beyond just the basic qualifying criteria, right? Always, go beyond that, right? Start thinking about, what the AE would do if you were in that role, and start to treat that inquiry or that conversation as if you were an AE, right? Don't just hit the BANT criteria. Do they have budget, et cetera, because that's it's the meets minimum, right? You're not progressing your skill set by just having that same high level conversation and ticking the boxes all the time. You're not progressing as a seller by doing that. So as you're interacting with more people, try to progress your own skill set by taking those conversations deeper, trying to learn more, challenge, the ways that you interact with those people to try to get better.
Yeah. Like we do an SDR training program, and they're always surprised by this, but we start with talking about the actual people that the SDRs are going to be calling. We don't even talk about like the product or objection handling and all that stuff. It comes later. First and foremost, who are you calling? What are their main, pain points? What's a day in the life? What's their vocabulary? Because if you think about it, like there's a whole world of information that you can learn about those people. And the more that you know their world, then the better salesperson you could be, because you can speak their language,
Exactly. It's kind of like, if an SDR wants to know how they can stand out to leadership, you got to know what the leadership cares about, right? Same thing when you're talking to a prospect, you got to understand what the company is trying to do, what the company cares about, what they're trying to accomplish, in the coming year, and then go to the persona, right? What does the persona care about? what's their responsibilities? What are they trying to accomplish? And is there a fit between what you're selling and what that person's trying to do? And then, you can go into talking about the product and qualification and stuff like that. But if you can get really good at driving the conversation about the business, and you're curious about it, and you dig deep and you ask good questions, and you're curious about them and their role, that'll just open up so many more opportunities to talk about your solution, because the conversation will be so much broader.
100%. It's the same with if you just go into a conversation talking all about yourself and how great you are and all this stuff, you turn people off. But if you're curious and you know a little bit about their world and stuff like that, you just can open up such a better conversation. So I like how you said internally as well, with your leadership, with your manager, be more interested than interesting. You ever heard that one?
Yep. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. When I talk about myself as an introvert, I'm like, I got really good at asking questions. Like when I'm with people, even if it's in a social engagement, like I don't feel like I have anything interesting to say. So I just ask them questions about themselves, and it happens to be a good skill that matches well with being a seller. But yeah,
100%.
That's kind of how I operate.
I like that. So, cause I went to a social function, and I stopped drinking like 3 years ago. So like I'm so tight, when I go in. So I got to come up with a list of questions. I just open-ended questions to just walk up and start asking people so that they talk instead of me.
Yeah. Exactly. It takes a lot of pressure on finding something interesting to say if instead of talking, you just have somebody else to talk.
There you go. Well, Dan, this has been so interesting. And I just, sharing your wisdom with our listeners has been so helpful. I got a whole page of notes here, and I'm sure that folks may want to get in touch with you. What's the best way that they can follow up if they want to learn more about User IQ and Dan?
Yeah, happy to hit me up on LinkedIn. Again, it's Dan Bonnet, User IQ. You should be able to find me. We don't have tens of thousands of employees, so I'll probably be the first one that comes up.
Okay.
You can reach me at dan.bonnet@useriq.com as well.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for being on the Sales Development Podcast, and let's talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.